let's get into this tier list, which is premiership windows.
Yep, we're going to go through the 18 clubs and decide where we think they are in their premiership window and perhaps where they think they are as well. And this is also not meant to be super predictive. So I'll give you an example. You might think that Melbourne finish higher than Port Adelaide. I'm just coming up with this like off the top of my head. You might think that they finish higher than Port Adelaide next year, but Melbourne's behaviours and strategy imply they're genuinely rebuilding.
It's more about the list.
Yeah.
As opposed to finishing position.
I would argue mindset as well.
Ooh.
Yeah. A certain je ne sais quoi.
Yeah.
Look, to use the Melbourne example, they're clearly rebuilding now. With Port Adelaide, you might say that you don't expect them to finish high next year. I'm just plucked that team. But they have done nothing to suggest they're actually trying to rebuild. And therefore, I would grade them differently.
I love that.
So teams like North Melbourne, West Coast, Richmond, we can categorise probably differently. North Melbourne probably no longer rebuilding, I would argue. We'll get into this. Whereas West Coast certainly is still rebuilding, for example.
So it's more about a state of mind or an identity of where your club is as opposed to they're going to finish in the top 8 because of this.
And equally, because of a list demographic, you might think this team clearly thinks it's in the premiership window, but you might not rate them. You might think they're doomed, but everything else they're doing suggests otherwise. So we'll go team by team and discuss.
There is one club that I want to talk about too at some point who I don't think fits any of these categories, but we'll get into that. Let's start with the Adelaide Crows.
I don't know who that is. All right, I'll run through them.
Yep. Let's do that.
And then if they go out of shot, that's fine for the time being. But the categories include It's Time, which is the teams that really think it's time to win the premiership. So straight off the top, like Geelong and Brisbane probably think they're there.
I had them in low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
Absolutely. On the run-up would be teams that are just about there, but maybe, need a key piece or some maturation. On the rebound are probably teams that I think are coming up. Whereas in transition are probably those teams that kind of neither here nor there or, trying to smooth over the list but not actively hitting the draft. And then you got some genuine rebuild teams.
I love it.
Should we just start with the real easy wins, both top and bottom?
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought here. So I've got straight away in low-hanging fruit, Brisbane and Geelong.
Yeah.
It's time.
Yeah, that's right.
You can't really categorise those teams. They're demographically, they're in the... I suppose Brisbane actually probably have a younger list as well. But they're back-to-back premiers right now. They're probably going to win a three-peat. They might win 4 in a row.
Yeah.
And ruin the league.
If they haven't already.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, totally agree. I think Geelong have probably been in those top 2 categories for most of the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Or 17 years
It just
even.
feels like most of my life other than when I was a child.
Yeah, that's right. So I think, looking at the list moves in particular of Brisbane, getting in Allen and Draper, I don't think we need to make that case any harder. So genuine rebuild teams, I think there's 3.
Okay.
Should we move to them? All right, let's start with West Coast. I don't think there's any doubt where West Coast are in terms of their list position.
Well, you're about to get pick 1 and pick 2 in the draft.
Yeah.
That would suggest a rebuild.
I would say that you're still a rebuilding team if you're really prioritising the draft and these picks are still a really important part of your list build. And West Coast is certainly there. And I would say Richmond's still there as well, even though one team was much stronger than the other this season. I don't think there's any doubt that Richmond with picks 3 and 4 will probably be looking at this draft and probably again next year as a way. They're certainly not on the rebound yet because they haven't got all the pieces together. They've made a really good start, but I think you're on the rebound once you've just about gotten maybe 3/4 of the team together.
So my question here would be, and a team that I have in my rebuilding list as well is Essendon.
Yeah.
Where would you have them? Because
we're happy with Richmond, sorry?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, Richmond and West Coast are probably the 2 most obvious rebuilding sides, albeit they are a little bit different. And it's not always easy to categorise a team like West Coast with what they're doing because I feel like their rebuild's been a little bit more disjointed. Like they've been to the draft in 2, 3, 4 years back as well. And then they've also tried to bring players, like experienced players in at the same time. But you guys were in a pretty unforeseen position, I feel, with injuries and stuff like that to some of your more experienced players. So it made it a little bit difficult. Richmond obviously are coming off a really successful period, but those 2 teams are the most obvious rebuilding sides for me.
Absolutely. I think there's one other, and you asked me about Essendon. I'm not sure where to put them.
They were an easy rebuild for me.
I was thinking about this last night. I'm trying to remember what points I made either side of it.
They're about to go to the draft and take picks 5 and 6 at least. They're trying to get up for specific players as well. If you actually bring in the last 2 to 3 years, they've taken first round picks that they're sort of building the team around in Isaac Kako and Nate Caddy, as well as some other talent that they brought through the door in 2024. Some really good mid-season drafting as well with some top-up players, but no player over 30 and a key look from the recruiting team to go back to the draft. I think it's a pretty obvious rebuild.
So I was debating between that or on the rebound. But the rebound does imply they've gone down and then up again, which is not true of Essendon.
I think that's taking results into it too much.
Yeah,
because there's a chance that they bounce a little bit in 2026.
Yeah.
But I don't think that actually shows the direction that they're in as a club.
What were their list changes? Obviously, the big decision was to hold on to Merritt. I would agree that I don't think that is a sign that they're trying to contend. I think the reasons for that were nuanced and different.
And manied.
Nuanced and manied. Is that a thing people say? That's
never.
A great call though. Nuanced and manied. I love that. I'm going to use that again in this show. Look, it is probably a rebuild actually.
As far as the off-season changes, what are we looking at? Ben Hobbs, Will Setterfield went out.
Made some calls on them. Laverde delisted.
Laverde delisted as well. He was one of the first.
They lost Draper as well. That was, that's not a strategic move though, so it probably doesn't weigh into it at all.
Held Ridley, but Ridley's still probably in the sweet spot of, he's 26, 27?
Yeah.
So he's not fully aging.
That's right.
The other one they got rid of was Lual, but most of those delistings, to be honest, are just younger players that they probably feel aren't ready.
Yeah.
Or weren't AFL standard for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. Look, I'll agree with that. I can't find a really reasonable argument against having them in genuine rebuild. And of course it doesn't really matter the fact that, maybe fully fit without injury, Essendon might have finished 12th. That doesn't mean they're not rebuilding.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So they are distinct from genuine rebuild, and they may actually finish higher than some of the teams we put in different categories next year. So it's not a prediction in that sense.
They could bring in the 2025 draft the player that they build this next generation around. So I feel like that inherently is rebuilding for me.
Yeah, I suppose you'd say that they don't have all the key pieces and they're trying to add particularly top-end talent, I would have thought. Like they probably need to find A-graders who will form that key part of that team.
Absolutely.
Going forward.
I have a team to bring up here.
Yep.
Because I want your opinion on this. I've got the Melbourne Demons and I sort of had them between the bottom two categories of in transition and genuine rebuild. What do you think on the Ds?
What were the two? Sorry, genuine rebuild and what was the other?
In transition.
Yeah.
I don't think they can be on the rebound because they've been bad for too long.
Yeah, agreed. I think rebuild, but they could be closer to coming out of it than some of the other teams, but I would say rebuild. I think when you make decisions like sell Petrarca, sell Oliver, tell Stephen May, that's probably different. It's really about Petrarca, really. I think that decision to, they gave him their blessing to look around. And while they have drafted well for a few years, I still think it's probably rebuild.
Yes. Yeah, the Oliver Petrarca going out.
What would an in-transition team look like? I'd say it's probably like Carlton.
Yeah.
And the distinction is like they're not cashing in the draft. Okay, Carlton kind of are, but or a Port Adelaide even, because they're not like accessing the draft to try and rebuild the next generation. They're trying to maybe use other methods to smooth out their demographic.
I mean, I don't know what the hell I know you just brought them up as an example. I don't know what the hell they're trying to do.
Yeah.
They don't even have a category in this, in my opinion.
Yeah. I'd say Melbourne, because they're hitting the draft.
Yes.
I think, and the top ends of the draft, I think they go in there with these teams here. I'm going to say that I don't expect this to necessarily be the bottom four next year.
No, it's not about ladder position, as you said. I think the only argument that I would make on Carlton to also throw them in that same group is the fact that they kind of are going to the draft in stealth because of the father-sons.
Agreed. I don't know if I would describe them as rebuild. I don't think that's how they'll be talking about it at the moment. I think, going to... Their hands were tied a little bit in terms of trying to get like Hayward and Florent because trading in more picks would have had diminishing returns for them this year. So that's why they wanted established players. It doesn't necessarily mean they're trying to contend, but I also don't think they'll be planning to, finish low enough next year. It gets complicated because they have father sons.
Here's a question. Is Patrick Cripps, Ben Mackay's a little bit younger, isn't it? Not Ben Mackay, Harry Mackay, sorry. I always do that. Are those kind of more experienced players on the Carlton list that you would call their best players, a la Patrick Cripps? Is he going to be in the next premiership team, or will it be a new group of players leading them?
I would have thought it'd be a new group of players leading them, but I think that when you bring in, how many established players do they bring in? And I say established meaning not draftees. So like Campbell Chessers, Liam Reedy, they were unsuccessful getting Buku Kamas, weren't they?
They were.
There were some other players they brought in that are now escaping me. Ainsworth.
Ainsworth was the other one. So most of those
and
guys...
Florent and Hayward, sorry, that's 5 players.
Yeah, and most of those guys on the north side of 25.
Yeah.
But only just.
See, to me, that's kind of them planning for a few years when some of those guys over 30 drop off. So I would describe that as in transition, to be honest. I don't think it's been an all-out assault on the draft. They've kind of got their foot in both camps there, but I think Carlton will be expecting to be competitive next year. So I would put them in transition.
Yeah, and I think they still have key pillars. So yeah, fair enough.
It doesn't mean that they won't drop to genuine rebuild if it goes poorly. It is possible, but I don't think they're there yet.
Yeah, they could end up in a really interesting spot there, I reckon, Carlton. What about North Melbourne? My Kangaroos.
I've put on the rebound.
On the rebound?
Yeah, kangaroo pun.
On the rebound. Explain that to me.
For me, on the rebound is the category where teams have probably just about spent enough time accessing the draft. I think this is, and they're ready to move up the ladder. That's not necessarily an assessment of their quality, but I think if you go back to last year when North Melbourne traded their future first to get the player they wanted in Matt Whitlock, I think that, to me, that signalled intention that 2025 would not be a year where North were going to prioritise the draft. In the end, they didn't win enough games to really justify that. But at the same time, I think North Melbourne are at the point now where there's diminishing returns on just getting so many draft picks and then playing them in their position. I think the time is now to move up. And therefore, I think they're certainly more advanced than West Coast and Richmond. And I'm not sure if they'll be better than Essendon next year. But, I think it's much more linear. They've gone down and gone up, whereas Essendon are a little bit harder to compare. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd pick a couple of holes in that just on the fact that it's been linear. I mean, it's been just consistently quite bad, I would say, over the few years. I do think, though, the one thing that I do agree with other punters and stuff like that, we've built enough around a good midfield group. And when we talk about North Melbourne a little bit later, we can sort of go into those players particularly. But when you are, building around Sheasel and Wardlaw and these kind of younger McKercher and Dersma to a degree, you are going to have some success eventually. And I could see North even in some ways kind of just jumping up even one more category in 2026 into that like on the run up. I could see them having a bit of a jump in 2026 is what I'm trying to say. And a surprising jump where people probably thought that was going to happen in 2025 and it didn't, which is, I understand why you're putting them on the rebound for that reason. Yeah,
so I'm a little confused. At first I thought you were going to push them down into genuine rebuild. I think they're past that.
Yeah, so do I.
Okay. So so do you agree on the rebound?
Yeah, I do.
So to distinguish between on the run up and on the rebound is on the run up is probably more like your Adelaides and Fremantles who have tasted finals and possibly ready to take that next step. So that's the way I would distinguish it.
Could you imagine North making the 8 in 2026?
No.
No chance.
No chance. But I think they'll escape the bottom. I think they'll escape the bottom 4.
Maybe I'm being too optimistic there.
You know what's funny though? This is all like in season, we're all negative, and off season, it's like, you never know, because all season you slaughtered North Melbourne on this channel.
Yeah, I know. But there's still a jump coming.
Yeah.
There will be a jump. And I've always said, I think we've like recruited a pretty unbalanced side overall. And I think that's going to leave us like, we're going to come unstuck at some point because we're not going to be able to recruit guys that we need to fill in holes. Yeah. That doesn't mean that we're not going to go from 17th to 8th
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just means that I don't think that we can make that jump to be a Brisbane or a Geelong, a really successful team.
Yeah. I suppose the play with North, and we're going to talk about North a little bit later as well, is becoming competitive enough that people want to play for you again. A little bit like what St Kilda's done now.
Exactly.
They had the first domino and then they had 4. So we'll see in time. But I think clearly on the rebound, I think from a list build point of view, they'd be more interested in established players that want to play for them rather than, more access to the draft.
So just to be clear here, you can't see North top 4 Harry Sheasel Brownlow.
No, just to be clear. No, you're right. I'm glad we clarified that. But I think that I'm more optimistic about a jump than I was this time last year. I think they've pretty much finished almost exactly where I had them. I think third last.
Yeah.
I think I had them third last. Next year, we'll see. But I think, they could finish higher than Melbourne, maybe Essendon.
The bottom 3 was very regulation this year.
Yeah.
Like whatever order you had it was West Coast, Richmond, North Melbourne, I think was pretty clear.
That's true. I think North clearly move out of the bottom 2. Yeah. Like that mix, if that makes sense.
Levi Sutton makes a really good point there, Jesse just being a hater. Yeah, exactly.
For not tipping North to play finals next year. How do we?
4.
Oh yeah, and Sheasel Brownlow. Yeah,
Brown cheese.
I just look at the age. It is a good reliable indicator of where a team's going to finish.
No, it's a good. I think it's fair. 11th to 15th is what Alex B says, and I think that is a fair call.
I think that's sound.
Who is next?
We can choose. We haven't done an on the run up team, so why don't we talk about someone who you think is on the run up? I said Adelaide before. So are they? Is it its time or is it on the run up? I would argue that they probably finished minor premiers way earlier than they'd expected in their list build, and therefore I still think from a time point of view, I don't know if we're there with them in the same way we'd be there with expecting Geelong to be there. Is that inconsistent?
I don't want to blur lines here, but I have this feeling that the Crows could be one of those teams that drop off next year as they get found out a little bit from a game plan point of view, because I think their game plan was very predictable in 2025. And it kind of caught some teams by surprise, just the quality of players that they had to play to that game style, but I'm not sure if it's going to yield the same results in 2026. But that's not really what we're doing here at the same time, right? We are kind of trying to talk about the list. I sort of can't shake this feeling that they are still a few players short in key positions to make them one of those really top teams. But if you compare to them, all we're doing here is comparing them to other teams in the competition, right?
Yeah.
And they probably sit on the run up, don't they?
I would agree with on the run up. I also think you think about who their best players are and what's the age demographic of that.
Yeah,
right. And that's your Rankin, your Dawson, your Thilthorpe. I would argue they've got heaps of time. It's not like they're 28. These guys are like 24, 25, some of them. So I would say on the run up, and they do need to make some tweaks. I would agree, and probably reinforce that midfield with an established player to move up. But for the time being, definitely on the run.
If you're picking areas of their team that can improve from recruiting, what do you want?
A genuine dynamic midfielder.
Sid Draper?
Yeah, that's true. I kind of keep forgetting about him.
Yeah.
We talk about Adelaide needing a midfielder, and Sid Draper I really liked in his draft. Yeah.
He's a pretty dynamic midfielder.
So you're right. That could come from within. He is only 19 or 20 years old. So they may have to be patient, but he played a bit of Sandford, didn't he? In his his draft year?
In his draft year. Yeah, he played a couple of games. Yeah. Had pretty solid returns, but no, he's explosive, gets out of the stoppage really well. Probably needs to work on his kicking a little bit, but I think it shows the fact that he didn't have to play as much in his opening year probably shows where their list was at, and they had a pretty good run with injury and stuff like that for most of the season.
That's true.
I think they're a back flanker short overall to draw a line under it. They need to find a bit of a backup ruckman, I feel. Overall, they need to have some sort of a transition there for the future away from Riley O'Brien.
Yeah.
And I suppose, do they need a Tex Walker replacement, or do you think they've got enough there with, say, like bringing in Maley as a potential extra forward? Do they need that kind of third tall type? I suppose Fogarty is sort of that.
Yeah, Fogarty, Thilthorpe. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but I read that they're really big fans of Aiden Schubert, which I thought would have been a strange recruit for them, to be honest. I suppose if he plays that second ruck over time, then Thilthorpe doesn't need to.
Do you think they're just having a little bit of FOMO in the draft because there's so many South Australian players that are sitting around and they want to get up into that a little bit, because most of them are a little bit ahead of their pick?
For sure. Although there's still plenty of other SA boys that are not key forward rucks. So it was just the type of player that I thought was curious. So maybe they're thinking along the same lines as you. But Tech signed on anyway, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, talking about the next year.
It's you wouldn't expect him to play any more than one more year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I think that's fair. So yeah, they're a clear team here. Another one that I would put in this category pretty comfortably and doesn't need to be spoken about too much, I think, is Freo.
Yeah, agreed.
Who you love?
Yes, love seeing them do well.
Yep,
it's always great around my household when Fremantle's winning. No, I'm joking. I think they have a really good list balance and star quality in most parts of the field. And I think a lot of the players have their best. Well, some of those key players like your Jacksons, your Tracys, and your Youngs still have their best footy ahead of them. Maybe Sarong and Brayshaw are closer to the finished product, but I think it is a matter of time before they contend. But they are still relatively young. I think they in the last 5 to 10 weeks of the season, their average age moved closer to the middle. But I think over the course of the season, they were bottom 4 or 5 for age. So that just means that they have time, in which case I would say they're not in the top category where there's a lot of pressure. But yeah, would you agree?
I would agree with everything that you said there. Yeah, they're definitely, when you actually go through and you look at the exact age of these players, I did this exercise through the week and I was like, Sarong is only 24.
Yeah.
Which is actually crazy.
Yeah.
He feels like a player that's in his late 20s. But at the same time, I do agree with what you said in the middle there, and I've said this throughout the year. I don't think Brayshaw and Sarong are getting much better.
Yeah.
They're sort of maxed out with their output. I mean, what more could Sarong do?
Yeah, exactly.
Get, 15 contested possession and 12 clearances a game. He's not really going to improve on that too much, I don't think. So Hayden Young's probably one that can push them to another level in next season. I think they just bring in, they're kind of in a luxurious position where the list is pretty balanced, it's pretty good, and they can just bring in pieces. Like that's why they were able to get Murphy Reid in the draft. They didn't have to go fishing for types that they needed or anything like that. And they seem to be able to, although they've lost a lot of talent over the years, they seem to be able to attract it as well pretty well with players like Shea Bolton. Cozzy Pickett could come to them as well.
I long for the day where a talented WA player doesn't just want to play for Fremantle. That's our own fault though.
Yes.
Yeah. What about someone who does have some real pressure to win the premiership this year based on their list demographic? I would say Collingwood actually has to be put in the it's time.
Yeah, they have to be.
Because I think most people would expect that they probably won't win the flag next year. And you might even, unless you're a Collingwood fan, you might even think it's delusional to suggest that they could. They went a million miles off it this year. But I would just say that based on the list management strategy of up to this very point, there hasn't been a huge amount of consideration for what happens next. I suppose you could say Perryman and Houston are medium-term recruits. So there's that. But I think they're like the oldest team of all time. I don't know if that will change next year. They have moved on a few players like Mason Cox and Tom Mitchell and Myercheck leaves. But regardless of whether you think they even will play finals, I think with a team with a list demographic like that, it's time. And I reckon in 12 months' time, we'll be doing this and we'll be saying they're in transition.
The concerning thing for Collingwood heading into next season is the only way that you can see them bouncing back up the ladder or competing again and getting better, because everyone's going to get better in 2026. The only way you can see that with them is this sort of ambiguous organic growth from younger players coming in and filling positions. And they haven't, it's not like over the last 4 to 5 years, they've gone heavily in the top end of the draft and there's talent sitting there like Adelaide. You said you've got Sid Draper who can just slot in and he's already sort of a potential A-grade talent. They've got guys that they picked up in the 30s to the 50s of the draft. So the likelihood of even one of those guys becoming a star or even a regular starter is probably low. And you would have expected that they were busier in the off-season this year to make them better. So I agree with you. If they can attract talent over the next 12 months, then we might be having a different conversation. But they're on a tightrope, it feels.
I think they're keeping their powder dry. And it feels like this coming year might be a bit of a nothing year for them in the sense that they're not going to be good enough to contend. And they could play finals and have some good times. Yeah.
Have some good wins.
But I honestly think in 12 months, watch them to be a major player in the off-season stakes. So
Zachary Butters types.
Yeah, the upside to losing a Myercheck and, maybe an Elliott, Pendlebury side bottom, we don't know about those guys next year. And your Tom Mitchells and Mason Coxes is that they will free up some money and they'll be an attractive club to play for. So I don't think they'll be in too much trouble, but then I think they'll be in transition by that point.
Absolutely.
Who we got next?
Woody just said rogue call, but 50-50 call for them to make the 8. I think that's probably a fair call. I think I at this point would have them in, but that's open.
Yeah. I hope it's clear why we still put them in its time, even though we're not saying they'll finish top 4.
Absolutely.
What about the Gold Coast Suns, Dylan?
It's time.
It's one of the 2 categories. I would agree it's time.
It's time.
Yeah.
It might feel a little bit unfair, like we're placing too high expectations of them, because you could argue that they're in that same group as Freo and the Crows.
Agreed.
Based on like kind of just scraping into finals and having a nice little run there. But I think they have more talent than both of those teams.
Yeah.
The acquisition of Christian Petrarca, Jamari Ugle-Hagan kind of signals that they are wanting to really, really compete and have an actual, good run at it in 2026. So I think you have to put that expectation on them. And again, they're set up with the youth. Still got tons of top 10 draft picks that are just kind of sitting there that haven't even played much footy at the moment. So fortuitous position. And it makes me wonder how teams like North Melbourne are ever going to compete and play for premierships.
Yep, I don't think I need to add too much. I think you could justifiably put them between the 2 categories if there was one, because while there is a level of maturation in the recruitment of Petrarca, you could say that they also don't have the pressure of time, which makes them similar to Fremantle and Adelaide. So I think they could easily sit in both groups, but they could also go deep next year.
I think there's an argument, though, on all the 6 teams that we've got in the top 2 categories. There has to be some expectation of not just being a team that's like almost there.
Yeah.
Like who is going to compete with the Brisbanes and the Geelongs? They can't just win it every season. You've got to try to steal it off them. You know what I mean? Take it from them with even a young team.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Who's next?
GWS.
Oh, they're a hard one.
They're a hard one too. Is it in its time or is it in transition? Those are the 2 for me. Or on the run-up. They're certainly not the other 2. They're hard ones. Let's characterise what their list management has looked like. I feel like there's been a push towards the draft and youth to build an up-and-coming layer to eventually replace those veterans who have served them well for a long time.
I like how you said that, actually. It's sort of like a resistance layer.
Yeah.
They've just been bubbling away under the surface.
Yeah, I mean, those high picks include Goddard, James Leake, Finn Callaghan, Aaron Cadman. They traded up to get pick 1. So there has been Darcy Jones, yep. There has been a genuine move towards the draft. They are not really the sort of team who trades in those top-line players because of the disadvantages they probably face getting players to come play for them.
They get more the top-up guys, don't they?
Yeah.
Your Stringers, your Clayton
Or your
Olivers.
behavioural issue players that are willing to come like Laverde and Stringer.
Who just got delisted.
Yes. Both of them have been delisted this year from their respective clubs, although I think Stringer's getting picked back up, and I think Laverde does end up at GWS.
Yeah, I believe so.
I think so. So anyway, they're a hard one to categorise. I don't think I see it as a realistic possibility that they win the premiership. Their list balance has enough players at the top end for me to not want to put them in on the run-up because it feels like there's 2 groups there.
I feel this season we're going to see, and when I say this season, I mean 2026, we're going to see from them a larger number of those younger players who have been bubbling away in the VFL come into the side. And you're going to see some of these guys, obviously Callum Ward's retired.
Yeah.
Is Josh Kelly going to be phased out even a little bit more?
He's got that injury as well.
Exactly. So I think you have to put them in transition. I think this is going to be maybe a bit of a dead year for them.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I think in transition is a good call. I don't think on the run-up, I don't think they're close enough to be on the run-up, if that makes sense, even though they played finals. Like, it's more like their list build. And I feel like, as you said, it's going to be a shift towards that younger group once you're Toby Green, Stephen Cornelio, and Jesse Hogan, who's on the wrong side of 30 as well now.
They don't have the obvious youth of a Gold Coast Suns, Freo Dockers, Adelaide Crows, do they?
Correct, yeah.
There's still a lot more development to go, which I think kind of naturally puts them into that category.
Yeah. Tom Green is also part of the younger group, actually.
Of course.
Yeah, he's only 24.
And they're definitely, they're in a better situation than a lot of teams.
Yep.
What are you saying about their crosstown rivals?
The Sydney Swans, I think they're in its time.
Me too.
Okay, cool.
Skip?
Look, summary, they recruited Charlie Curnow and they've played in 2 of the last 4 grand finals. Which is actually
crazy.
It's crazy when you say it like that because recency bias allows us to forget that they are a premiership quality. Well, they're a top 4 quality team. And I think have the top end potential of any team out there. Obviously, there's questions around depth and best 22 balance. But getting Curnow is massive. And I think as much as anything, it underscores the point that they recruited Charlie Curnow, a 28-year-old key forward with 3 first-round draft picks. Like, what does that say about where Sydney think they're at?
I mean, I think it says that they back in their academy at the moment to produce really good talent.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily need those high draft picks. But it also... You look at the back end of 2025 where they went on that run of winning, 10 out of their last 12. When Errol Goulden is in that side, he is the man for them. So I think there's no doubt that this team, with a big key presence forward of the ball in Charlie Curnow, if he stays fit in 2026, they have to be competing. And the age profile suggests that. They've got one of the best midfields in the competition with Heaney and Warner and Rowbottom and that Goulden mix. A decent backline, probably a bit more workman-like back there, but they've got ball movers like Blakey to move the footy for them and transition the ball. And then it's really just that forward line where the smalls come into it, but they needed that Charlie Curnow figure.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting side note before we move on to the next team is sort of came out that Dean Cox and Will Hayward and Ollie Florent were basically shown out the door by Sydney, possibly just to facilitate this trade as well, but perhaps Dean Cox is making some moves on...
Ruthlessly efficient or dog act?
We'll see in time.
That's boring.
The Hayward one surprises me more than the Florent one. I have no insight as to what they're like culturally, but Hayward has been an important player more so than Florent. So interesting.
For me, the Hayward one is just as simple as you're getting an upgrade.
Yeah,
like it's ruthless in the sense that he is a better player than you, and we need him more. Florent's probably a bit more. Do we rate you or those sorts of things as well?
True.
Hawks.
One of the top 2 categories here for Hawthorn. They're not as young as they appeared to be or were maybe 2 years ago in terms of the average age. Obviously, that's skewed a little bit when you recruit Josh Battle, Tom Barras, and anyone else that I'm missing. They tried heavily to go for a variety of midfielders this year. Zach Merritt at 30 years old implies that let's go get it now kind of thing. They also did go for Harley Reid, Zach Butters, I think Oscar Allen they at least met with. What other players did they meet with? I don't reckon I've covered them all there. They met with a variety of players this year.
Yeah, they just didn't seem to land anything, did they?
Yeah, that's
at the
right.
End of the day. I mean, even their finishing position suggests that they're ready to go. Top 6 last year, top 4 this year, as far as where they finished after finals. And they probably do just need that one. Maybe it is just a maturation from within with them because they weren't far off it. And there is going to be some natural development because of their, like compared to say Collingwood, they're going to have that naturally with some of the picks that they've got in recent drafts. But yeah, it is sort of at the same time, again, it's not like the Crows, it's not like the Gold Coast where they're just going to have this amazingly young team get better after a year. They're going to have to find it from somewhere a little bit more, aren't they?
They are. I think... It's a tough one. You could make the case that they're on the run up when you look at some of their best talents, and they're a pretty well balanced team in terms of like quality role players playing a system, and they actually lack, the spread of A grade talent that other clubs do. With a lot of potential in guys like Will Day.
I sort of disagree with that. I feel like they actually have it, but they don't have it in the positions that we naturally think of.
Like, I think they're niche A-grade players.
They're niche A-grade players, like Dylan Moore.
I agree, yeah. No, I'm with you there. I didn't mean to undermine the team that is Hawthorn.
Yeah.
They are good, and those players are great. But you're right. I think like there's no A-grade key position forward.
No, and there's no
Australian midfielder yet,
apart from Will Day, who's been injury prone.
And
they don't have like
good.
a Heaney, Warner, Goulden midfield.
Yeah, that's really what we're talking about here. So therefore, it's a little bit harder to like look at their best players and think how old are they?
Who are their best players? Give me their best players. Will Day.
Yeah, it immediately came to mind because when he's on, he's on, and when he's in, he's on. Basically, rather. Yeah. I think Dylan Moore at times. I don't know if did he back up? Was it 2024? I think was his really strong year.
That was his All-Australian year. He wasn't as good as that, but he's still a high-quality player.
Yeah. I mean, James Sicily probably on the legacy, if you want to, well, not legacy, but just the reputation.
No, I think he is.
Yeah.
He's in their top.
But Josh Weddle is probably one of their most dynamic, players who can take them to the next level, but probably has he been one of their best players at the moment? I'm not sure.
He will be.
He will be, I agree. Mavior Troll actually had an outstanding sort of year, didn't he?
Here's one. What if Cam McKenzie becomes everything that we've expected him to be? He's only 22?
Yeah, he would be. Yeah.
If he becomes an A-grade midfielder, they can win the flag.
I really liked him in his draft here. So all that to be said, it's probably also one of these teams that sits in the middle. They are, I reckon, older than Fremantle. So I reckon you could say that in 2026, there's probably a sense of its time.
Absolutely. Chad Phillips, a great comment here. What's the count up to now for how many times the word maturation has been used in this stream?
We talk about how many we pick up words, we say them for weeks on end, and then we drop them once we realise we say them too much and we never say them again.
It's at least 7.
Yeah.
That's what I want to say. We've got a couple of clubs left, do we?
We do. 3.
3 clubs.
St Kilda. Let's go with St Kilda first.
Are we leaving Port Adelaide until the end?
Maybe. I didn't really want to touch it right now.
It's so gross.
But St Kilda, I think, like more of a talking point.
Yeah, actually, St Kilda's tricky.
Are they, I'd say, on the rebound or on the run up? They're certainly not in its time, and they're not in transition, and they're certainly not rebuilding anymore. So we're talking about the second and third categories there.
Is there any, are we just completely wiping out its time based on what the off-season that they've had?
Yeah.
That's not.
Nah, because I still think what the group that will take them forward is a lot of the guys they've drafted in the last 4 years and not Jack Silvani and Sam Flanders.
I've got a question for you here.
TDK maybe.
Round 1, 2026, everyone's fit. Who's in the midfield? And this will answer the question of where they're at.
Put me on the spot here. Flanders obviously will play midfield.
Yes.
Will Naz be a full-time midfielder, or will he be like more of an impact? I think probably.
I think you will. I think you have to have him in there.
Philippou will play midfield.
That's a complete. I think that midfield there, albeit that sounds sexy as anything, that's still young.
Yeah, true. Windhager. More the defensive midfielder in that scenario.
Crocker's added in McRae. And you've obviously got TDK. It's a brand new midfield.
Yeah.
McRae will be probably the one that's played the most football in that team as a midfielder with Nass, who came in the second half of the season, which is crazy.
Yeah.
I think it's got to be straight to on the run-up.
Yeah.
They have to compete for finals.
They certainly have more expectation than North Melbourne. Is North Melbourne going to be left alone in that category?
Probably.
See, I did have Essendon originally when I looked in there. But anyway, we'll move on. We're talking about St Kilda.
I can't stand another... even if we win 8 games in 2026, I can't stand it. I just can't stand the purgatory.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway.
Yeah. But I mean, St Kilda were in purgatory and then they recruited all those players, so you never know.
Just sort of sense we won't do that. But anyway, 2 clubs to go.
The Bulldogs?
Bullies.
On the run-up or it's time? This is looking like we have a lot of premiership contenders, but that was also true this year.
I sort of have this gravitation to put the Dogs in transition as well.
Okay.
But they sort of have been in transition. They've blooded a couple. I really rate Fraser. I really rate Ed Richards. I really rate O'Donnell. And they're players that they've just sort of rotated into new positions.
Mm. That is kind of normal though. It doesn't necessarily imply they're actually genuinely in transition. I think with their recruiting strategy this year, it was go get Wilkie and amongst others. They tried for Silvani, they tried for Tyler Young, they didn't go for Leaky Lear, did they? But Jordan Butts was the other one. So, I mean, fairly low-key. Going for Wilkie would have been a big, massive deal. And I think they're working on Zach Butters in the background.
Mm.
I think they're in the top 2 categories.
Okay. I'd maybe make a small argument for transition, but I think if you have them in the top 2 categories, you have to have the Dogs in its time.
Because of Bond?
Because of Bond.
I would agree with that.
But also because of Sam Darcy. And not because, I know he's future-proofed because of his age.
Yeah.
But if you've got the best player in the competition in your team in the midfield, you've got the best key position forward, you've got Ed Richards, who is probably a top 10 player in the competition. What more do you need at the end of the day to do something? It's kind of go time, isn't it?
Key defender.
I
agree with your point, to be honest. And I think that's why they went for Wilkie, because I reckon their assessment would be similar.
Yeah.
So again, this is a 2026 assessment. I would probably agree. I reckon the Bulldogs in the top tier.
They have to be.
Yeah.
You have to put that pressure on them.
Yeah, that's right.
So that leaves us with 7 teams.
Was that not true this year, though?
Yeah.
We had 9 teams in the top In the 9?
Yeah.
The top 9.
Well, I would
you believe
argue
it?
that the Dogs they should have been in that category this year.
Well, I included them because they finished 9th.
Yes.
Yeah, we've actually added in Sydney and St Kilda. Again, this is not predicting the ladder next year. This is all about mindset. And it's fair to suggest that about half the league thinks they can win the flag next year.
And North Melbourne.
True. Yeah, and North Melbourne.
Throw on the rebound in there.
Yeah.
Probably the only one that changes from this season is the Giants have moved out into transition.
St Kilda have moved into on the run-up.
Yep.
And Sydney, I think, with the Kerno thing would be genuinely in its time.
And they played footy to the level of the finals teams.
Yeah. And Melbourne have moved into the rebuilding category.
Does this reiterate the 2-tiered system of the AFL currently?
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely. So, on that note, speaking of 2 tiers, let's cry about Port Adelaide. That was terrible. Segue into the Port Adelaide Football Club.
I can't even give any analysis on them because I don't know what they're doing.
I think they have to count as in transition because they're not hitting the draft. So let's look at the list build over the last few years. They went hard on Jason Horne-Francis, but you could say that because he was in his first year, that counts as like an expensive draft pick, right? So they've got a nucleus of Rosie, Butters, and Horne-Francis, which is that's imposing. That's scary. Can they keep them together is another question, but that is currently where they sit. And probably lack some structural pieces around the field.
This is going to sound facetious.
Haven't liked the draft either.
And a little bit like clickbaity, but do they have any other players that you would write home about? Like any other really good players?
They've got some decent players.
Yeah, decent players, but everyone's got decent players.
I'm trying to think. We may be ignorant here. Help us out, chat, because we're kind of forgetting.
I think people would talk about players like Willie Rioli.
Yeah, who's gone.
Who's just retired. They would talk about players like Aliria.
Yeah.
Who I think is good at specific things, but I think he's like made to defend a little bit too much.
Georgiadis.
Yeah, great.
Good comment. Thank you. I knew we were forgetting someone. He did have a fantastic year.
No, he's incredible. Bergman is too.
True. Yeah.
Yep. You've proved me wrong.
It's the 1st of November and it's actually a little bit harder to remember certain things.
I suppose Bergman is probably in that like youthful, it's a future player. He hasn't kind of put it down yet, but it definitely is.
Yeah.
You could argue maybe a Lukosius has the talent, but I don't know if we're going to see it.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, we're talking about established good players. I don't think he's there yet, but Georgiadis and Bergman are. It's still light though. It's still light. And some of the players that were part of that Premiership tilt, if you want to call it that. They didn't play in the grand final, but they got close. Charlie Dixon's gone. Willie Rioli's gone. Travis Boak is gone. So there has been some general movement there. So what we're talking about in terms of their list build is they've very curiously traded out of this year altogether. They've taken in Will Brodie and Corey Durden. I think they're cousins, Sam and Corey. It's interesting. I read, and I don't know if this is true, but I read that they really don't rate this draft. And they've pushed their assets into next year. So the part of that Durden trade was also banking a future second, I think.
I feel like that's such a cop-out, though. It's like we're in a really shit position in the draft, so we don't rate it.
I wonder if they're, looking at Dougie Cochran and hoping to have enough points. And I don't even know how realistic that is, whether he counts as their NGA. I think there's some doubt about that.
It feels scandalous to me that a team could perform so badly in a season, lose their best player
and do nothing
and be not even in the draft.
Yeah.
It's such a purgatory situation.
I think that's a fair point. I think I would be really flat if, West Coast were in that position.
Yeah.
Which, we suck, but we're doing something about it.
Well, exactly. And like people are putting in the chat, they're like Soldo, Vicentini, Sweet. They're not.
No. Unless he was... No.
Yeah, I mean, Sweet's been okay.
Oh, no, the previous question was who is Port's ruckman, that's why.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought they were putting that as like they're the good players.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a weird time, I think, to be a Port Adelaide fan. I think you'll get Will Brodie come in.
I think, do we put them in transition because we have no idea?
Yeah.
I think that's the only way, because they're not, I don't think they're on the run-up.
No, and Zach Butters will almost certainly leave.
It does feel like that, yeah. I mean, on the run-up, do they think they're on the run-up?
Surely not. I mean, new coach, transition.
True. Yeah. All right. We'll put Port in transition. Because, to cover off that point, they have also, lost players like Rioli and Boak and, replenishing through top-up players, if you want to call them that, in Will Brodie and, they've had a few over the years. Rory Atkins last year. Joe Richards was a pretty decent recruit for him.
The only positive I will throw into this, just because we've been probably overly harsh on them, they did have a good draft in 2024.
Barry, Whitlock and Mraz?
Yep.
That's true. I overlooked that last time we did this.
2023 was, I think, a poor drafting year, and I think they delisted already Charleston from that draft. And Stockwell survives.
Yeah, they drafted 3 small forwards late in that draft because that was the second year of the Horn-Francis trade.
Yeah.
So they only had later picks.
In fairness to them, I think there was a couple of years under Hinkley towards the end there where they overperformed ladder position. They were kind of outside their range, which obviously hurts you in the draft.
Yeah.
To be able to get in early, but yeah.
That's right.
I digress. That is a wrap, I think.
Yeah. So we think there's 7 teams that think they need to win the premiership next year. We think there's 3 that are on the run-up, Adelaide, Fremantle and St Kilda, who, would like to push it close, but we would all forgive them if they didn't, especially Fremantle. I'll forgive you. On the rebound, that as it turns out, that is barely worth a category when you've only got 1 team in it, but I think North are distinct from the genuine rebuild teams who are thinking, I suppose the distinction is those bottom 4 teams are thinking, let's get into the draft and draft picks. And I'm sure North don't hate early picks, but they don't have that same appetite for them. In transition are teams that are probably smoothing over a demographic. Carlton lose Curnow. They top up with 5 established players to differing extents. We just talked about Port Adelaide there. And GWS probably also shaping up for an assault on the flag in the future. I don't know. We ummed and ahed about exactly where to put them.
They're a tough one.
But they do have some good youth, which kind of makes them a little bit harder to assess. So
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Of those rebuilding teams, Melbourne, Essendon, Richmond, West Coast, add in Carlton and North Melbourne to that, so it's 6 teams. Who finishes higher in 2026?
The West Coast Eagles.
You don't believe that?
No. It's funny that I can't even get away with that. Like, you're just like, I know you're full of shit.
Yeah.
You know I'm not even serious. Who finishes higher out of those 6 teams? I think Carlton.
Okay.
I think that they will get by on the established players that they have. Look, North could actually finish higher than them. North or Carlton, I'd say.
North or Carlton?
Yeah. Oh, hang on. Do we include Essendon in that?
Yeah. Look at Essendon.
I think they're not as bad as people think.
No,
and they might just be mediocre, but like they could finish the top end of that group still.
Yeah, that's true. My leanings would be Carlton, Melbourne, Essendon, North Melbourne. Then that's 4 teams. That's most of them.
I can't say. I actually think Melbourne will finish lower than Essendon, Carlton and North Melbourne.
Yeah, you're right. I think, I'd throw Melbourne. So
Richmond could even finish higher than Melbourne next year.
No, I think it's North or Carlton.
Yeah.
I think it's North or Carlton.
Yeah. Or Essendon.
I think Richmond and West Coast will be in that bottom 2.
I think West Coast will be last again. Then Richmond v Melbourne is a little bit harder to split for me.
I say this and now I start to think about it and then I'm like, when the season kicks around, I'll be like, I have no faith.
Yeah,
that North
totally.
Melbourne can do anything. So.
I might actually go the other way. I'm feeling a bit neg about West Coast's competitiveness next year. But by round 1, I'll be like, we are totally beating the Adelaide Crows.
What are people saying in the chat here? So people saying North still in a rebuild. People are saying Roos though for the best of those teams, I assume. Carlton, says Alex B. North has the best list, says Edward. Do North have the best list or do they just have the best midfield? That's the question that I would ask.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, who are we comparing them against? The other rebuild teams? Or maybe an Essendon? Because it's a bit tricky to compare West Coast and Richmond, who are like staggered behind them. They've had like less drafts, so it's a little bit apples and oranges, a little bit. Maybe I'm talking shit there, but like it seems disingenuous to compare them to a Richmond who has the better young list. So it's just not.
Yeah.
Because North, we've seen 3 or 4 years of some of these guys.
Joel Haber says Carlton will have the best midfield in theory. As far as like for 2026, I assume you mean there. So Patrick Cripps, George Hewitt and Adam Chera is like the most experienced that will compete the best.
I thought he meant league-wide there. I was like, what?
No, I think amongst that group.
Sure.
So that will, I assume he means that will carry them. Unless he actually is going from a developmental point of view and he's like, we'll have Jagger, we'll have Cody Walker.
Yeah.
And
Sam Walsh would still be in that group.
What about Sam Walsh? Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Walsh and Jagger for 2026. Yeah. Will Jagger play... Will he be able to play round 1?
I would have thought that he'd be close because I think he did it in the preseason. So 12 months would put him to the preseason. But I'd imagine maybe he starts VFL just for, to be conservative. But I could be wrong.